You're joining us for a deep dive today into something that's really top of mind for anyone involved in the digital world. The cyber threat landscape we're kind of anticipating for 2025.
Yeah, and to get a clear picture, we've really sifted through a lot of information, reports from cybersecurity firms, detailed analysis from places like the German BSI.
Right, looking at 2024 right up to now, basically.
Exactly. And our mission, if you like, is to cut through all that noise.
Get straight to what matters most for you listening.
What are the key threats you need to understand for 2025? We're really focusing on how attackers are likely to get that initial access.
And what vulnerabilities they're, probably going to target.
Because it's definitely not static, is it?
Not at all. It's always shifting, getting more complex, frankly.
Yeah.
We're seeing just attack after attack, and the attackers seem, more skilled.
They are. So based on this analysis, the main ways they're getting that foot in the door seem to boil down to two main paths.
Okay, what are they?
First, it's manipulating people. Good old social engineering and phishing. Still.
Okay, still huge. And second, exploiting weaknesses, vulnerabilities directly in software.
Right.
And we also have to remember compromised credentials. There's sort of this skeleton key that enables a lot of this.
Okay, let's unpack that first one then. Social engineering, phishing. Sounds familiar, but you're saying it's still dominant.
Oh, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, humans are often, the weakest link. It makes these attacks incredibly effective.
And phishing itself is evolving, right? It's not just the classic dodgy email anymore.
Not at all. I mean, those are still around, but the tactics are much more refined. We saw a huge jump in voice phishing, vishing.
Vishing, you mean like phone calls?
Exactly. CrowdStrike reported something like a 442% increase in the second half of 2024 alone.
Wow, 442%? That's staggering.
It is. Think someone calling you, pretending to be your bank, IT support, whatever, trying to trick you into giving up info.
So the takeaway there is you need to be vigilant beyond just email. Phone calls, too. Definitely. And it goes further. We're seeing more QR code phishing.
Quishing, like scanning a dodgy QR code.
Yeah, takes you to a malicious site. Then there's SMS, phishing, smishing, obviously, and even attacks inside collaboration platforms like Microsoft Teams.
So they're hitting us everywhere we communicate digitally now.
Pretty much.
Right.
And linking into this, the use of AI is, frankly, quite concerning.
Oh, so?
Generative AI lets them craft really personalized, convincing phishing messages and at scale.
Makes sense. Harder to spot the fakes.
And it's not just text. They're using AI for fake websites, even deepfake audio and video. Makes impersonations much more believable.
So it lowers the bar for attackers.
Significantly. And it makes it much harder for regular users to tell what's real. Defending against this needs, multiple layers. Tech and very aware users.
Okay, now digging deeper, the reports mentioned some specific tactics that really took off in 2024. One was help desk fraud.
Yes, that's a really interesting one. Attackers impersonate an employee. They call the internal IT help desk and try to get a password reset or maybe even bypass MFA.
Wow, so they're exploiting that internal trust.
Exactly. Employees trust the help desk. If the verification isn't super tight, this can work. It really targets that point of trust.
Nasty. Okay, what else? There's something called paste and run. Or click fix.
Yeah, paste and run, or sometimes fake CAPTCHA. This is pretty insidious.
How does it work?
You land on a compromised site, maybe, and it tells you to copy some code, often PowerShell commands, and paste it into your command line.
And people do that.
They present it as, solve this CAPTCHA or fix this display issue. Seems technical, but necessary.
But it's actually malicious code.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It can give the attacker full control, install malware, steal files, move deeper into the network. It bypasses the usual caution about downloading files.
Clever in a horrible way.
Yeah.
Then there are the old favorites, like fake browser updates.
Still going strong. Those pop-ups saying your browser is out of date, click it, and bam, malware.
Simple, but effective, because people know they should update.
Right. It uses their security awareness against them. Mimics the real thing, so even careful users can get caught out.
And how do people even land on these sites? SEO poisoning and malvertising.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. They manipulate search results to push their fake download pages or phishing sites up the rankings.
So you search for legitimate software, and you get their malicious link first.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Or they use malicious ads on legitimate websites, so they're intercepting you during your normal browsing or searching.
Not just waiting for you to click a bad email link.
Exactly. And the speed this happens at is well, alarming.
How fast are we talking?
Some data suggests people can fall for these phishing tricks in under 60 seconds.
Less than a minute. Wow.
And often, like we said, this initial step is all about getting credentials, usernames, passwords.
Well, not necessarily installing malware right away, but getting the keys to the kingdom for later.
Precisely. Those credentials then unlock access for the next stage of the attack.
Okay, so the human element, huge vulnerability. But it's not the only way in, you said. Let's talk about the second vector, exploiting software vulnerabilities. This seems to be growing significantly.
It really is. The Verizon DBIR for 2024, it highlighted almost a threefold increase. That's 180% compared to the year before in breaches where exploiting a vulnerability was the critical entry point.
180% increase? That really shows a shift in focus, or at least effectiveness.
It underscores it heavily. And the speed they develop exploits now, it means you absolutely need a risk-based approach to vulnerability management. Focus on what's actually being exploited, like the stuff in the CISA hit list.
And attackers are getting faster at weaponizing these, including 0 days.
Incredibly fast. Ransomware groups especially are very agile. They jump on newly found vulnerabilities, sometimes even before they're publicly known.
That's the danger of 0 days, right? No patch available.
Exactly. Defenders are caught completely flat-footed.
So what kind of software are they hitting the most? You mentioned web applications were top for Verizon.
Yeah, web apps are a prime target. They're internet-facing, often the first point of contact. Makes sense, right?
Absolutely. Like that Next.js example they gave. CVE 2025-29927, an authentication bypass.
Right. A flaw in a widely used framework like that can have massive ripple effects.
And then perimeter devices.
Yeah.
VPNs, firewalls. The reports mentioned Ivanti, Fortinet, Cisco, Palo Alto Networks, SonicWall. Sounds like the usual suspects are getting hammered.
They're consistently targeted because if you compromise one of those, a VPN gateway, for instance,
You can get pretty deep into the network.
potentially gain broad access, bypass a lot of other controls. That's why they're so attractive. It's a persistent challenge securing these critical boxes.
And it's not just those edge devices, is it? Other critical stuff, too, like Microsoft Exchange, even backup solutions, Veeam, NetAVO.
Yes, targeting backups is a really nasty evolution, especially for ransomware groups.
Because it hits the recovery plan directly.
Exactly. Compromise the backups, and the pressure to pay the ransom goes way up. Undermines their ability to restore without paying.
We also saw mentions of OS components, like the Windows CLFS driver, and even container stuff like Ingress NGINX for Kubernetes. Seems like a wide net.
It shows they understand modern IT. They're looking beyond just user apps to the underlying infrastructure. Compromising Kubernetes could impact tons of services.
So what's the big appeal? Internet accessibility for web apps, sure, but also broad network access potential, maybe less EDR visibility on these kinds of devices compared to, say, laptops.
You've hit the key points. Easy to find online, potential for deep access if breached, and often, they lack the sophisticated endpoint detection you find on user machines. Makes detecting activity harder once they're in.
It feels like a constant uphill battle for defenders, just keeping up with the volume of vulnerabilities and how fast exploits appear.
It absolutely is. Overwhelming volume, exploit development, sometimes within hours. Huge pressure. That's why risk-based vulnerability management is non-negotiable now.
Focusing on the biggest actual risks.
Like those listed in the CISA known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. That KEV list is invaluable for prioritization. It shows what attackers are actually using right now.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so attackers are tricking us, or they're finding holes in our software. But there's that third piece you mentioned, compromised credentials. Still a major factor.
Huge. Credential theft and misuse are just fundamental. Coalitions analysis, top initial vector for ransomware, nearly half their cases.
Almost 50%.
Wow. And Kroll saw a rise in using valid accounts for initial access, too, up to 27% in 2024. It's persistent.
And these credentials often come from phishing, like we discussed, or maybe infostealer malware.
Exactly. Phishing is primary for harvesting them, but infostealers grabbing them from infected machines are also significant. They then give attackers legitimate-looking access.
And that's the scary part, right? If they have valid credentials, traditional malware-focused security might miss them completely. They're not breaking in, they're just logging in.
Precisely. CrowdStrike reported, 79% of attacks in 2024 were malware-free. 79%. That really highlights the shift towards, hands-on keyboard activity after getting initial access.
It does, and it means traditional antivirus isn't enough. You need to focus much more on user behavior, spotting anomalous logins, that kind of thing.
So where are these stolen credentials being used most often? Web apps again, desktop sharing tools, VPNs, cloud accounts.
All of the above. Web apps for data, desktop sharing for remote control, VPNs for network access, and yes, absolutely cloud accounts, with everything moving to the cloud.
And it really loops back, doesn't it? Social engineering gets the credentials.
Often, yeah.
Then those credentials are used to compromise systems, maybe remote access points, and then deploy ransomware or steal data. It's a chain.
It's exactly a chain. That initial fish might seem small, but it's stage one. Get the keys, move laterally, escalate privileges like a burglar getting in an unlocked window, then finding the safe keys and achieve the final goal.
Speaking of remote access, that brings us to another key area, abusing those external services. VPNs, RDP, VDI, essential for work, but also prime targets. Absolutely critical tools, but also a major attack surface. ReallyQuest reported a big jump in attacks targeting them, something like 21.3% increase between December 2024 and Feb 2025.
Wow.
And At Bay found remote access tools were the entry point in 8 out of 10 ransomware attacks they looked at in 2024.
8 out of 10.
Yeah, and VPNs accounted for 2/3 of those.
So attackers are either finding vulnerabilities in the VPN software itself,
Which we discussed, yeah.
or they're just using those stolen credentials to log in.
Those are the two main ways. Exploiting flaws gets direct access, but more commonly, given all the credential theft, they just log in like a regular user with stolen usernames and passwords.
And once they're in via VPN or RDP, they're essentially inside the perimeter, and their traffic might just blend in with everyone else's.
That's the appeal. They can move around with some stealth, making detection really tricky. It's both an entry point and a way to move deeper.
Okay, one last major vector before we dive into specific CVEs. Supply chain compromises. This feels like it's getting more attention, like a systemic risk.
It is. It's a growing and particularly insidious threat. Not just hitting one company, but targeting third-party vendors or software components to hit many downstream customers.
Like the MoveIt example.
MoveIt is the classic recent example, yeah. Verizon's DBIR saw a 68% increase in breaches involving a third party. It's now 15% of all breaches they track.
15%. And it's not just software components, right? Hitting an MSP or a cloud provider could have huge cascading effects.
Exactly. Compromise a managed service provider, and you could potentially access data or systems for hundreds, maybe thousands of their clients.
The World Economic Forum thinks nearly half of organizations expect significant supply chain attacks by 2025.
That prediction shows how seriously this is being taken now. Attackers see it as efficient, hit one target, gain access to many.
And for the victim organization, the one using the compromised vendor or software, it must feel incredibly opaque. The breach happened outside their control.
Completely. Limited visibility into your vendor security practices makes it really hard to manage that risk. It pushes towards needing better third-party risk management and ideally more secure development practices across the board.
Okay, so we know how they're getting in. Let's get specific. What vulnerabilities, what CVEs, are actually being exploited most? Because patching everything isn't feasible.
Right, that's the crucial point. Thousands of CVEs, but maybe less than 4% actually get used in attacks. You have to prioritize.
And that's where the CZKI catalog comes in again. Known exploited vulnerabilities.
Exactly. It's CDC's curated list of vulnerabilities with confirmed evidence of active exploitation. If it's on the KEV list, it's high risk, patch it ASAP.
It's the priority list. So can we look at some examples from, say, 2024 into 2025? Ivanti came up a lot in the news.
Yeah, Ivanti's Connect Secure VPNs and related gateways were hit hard. There was CVE 2025-22457, a critical stack buffer overflow.
Okay, buffer overflow, classic way to get code execution.
Right. And this one was initially rated low severity, but then found to be exploitable for RCE. Actively exploited, added to KEV April 2025.
Shows how severity ratings can change. And there was another Ivanti zero day, CVE 2025-0282, also exploited.
Correct. Another stack buffer overflow, reportedly used by state-sponsored actors, APT groups. It just highlights how attractive these perimeter devices are.
Gain broad access from one exploit.
Exactly. High-value targets. And there was also CVE 2024-29824 and SQL injection in their endpoint manager, allowing unauthenticated RCE on the local network.
It really sounds like Ivanti had a tough run with KEV additions.
They were consistently among the top vendors in the KEV list in 2024, yeah. Really underscores the need for vigilance if you're using their products.
Then, of course, Microsoft. Always near the top of the KEV list, presumably just due to sheer market share.
That's a huge factor. Windows, Office, Exchange, they're everywhere, so they're prime targets. We saw CVE 2025-29824, a use after free in the Windows CLFS driver, leading to privilege escalation.
Gaining higher privileges after initial access.
Yep. And CVE 2025-24989 in Power Pages, an improper access control issue.
And that Water Hydra group exploiting CVE 2024-24412, the smart screen bypass. Plus CVE 2024-4117 for RCE via crafted documents. It feels relentless.
It's a constant cycle. Discovery, exploit, patch. And like you said earlier, even older Exchange server flaws are still being hit. Patching everything consistently is hard.
Okay, moving beyond Ivanti and Microsoft, those other perimeter vendors.
Yeah.
Fortinet, Cisco, Palo Alto, SonicWall, also seeing frequent exploitation.
Absolutely. Fortinet's FortiOS and FortiClient vulnerabilities get exploited. Cisco ASA firewalls, routers, regular KV entries.
Palo Alto had 0 days in Panos.
Yeah, CVE 2024-00012 for admin bypass, CVE 2024-9474 for privilege escalation, hit KV late 2024. SonicWall had CVD 2025-2306, a critical deserialization flaw in their SMA gateways, actively exploited. These edge devices are just constant targets.
And it's not just infrastructure, right? Web frameworks like Next.js, databases like PostgreSQL, Apache products.
Correct. That Next.js auth bypass, CVE 2025-29927, saw active scanning. PostgreSQL had an escaping flaw leading to SQL injection and other products. Apache OFBiz, Airflow. Regularly top vendors in CAC-EV analyses. Vulnerabilities exist everywhere in the stack.
Even backup software, Naki View and Veeam, as we mentioned, exploited vulnerabilities there too.
Yeah, that's a worrying trend. The NAKV flaw CVE 2024-48248 allowed unauthorized RCE and access to plaintext credentials.
Ouch.
And Veeam's CVE 2025-2120 was a critical deserialization flaw for RCE, a system. Taking over the backup system is a major blow.
And the list just keeps going. Gladden Center Stack with a hard-coded key, Progress WhatsUp Gold with path traversal RCE, Itachi Pentaho auth bypass.
Yep, and even things like 7-zip, CVE 2025-0411 bypassing mark of the web, plus the usual suspects, Apple, iOS, Mac OS, Google Chrome with constant 0 days, file transfer tools like Clio exploited by ransomware groups.
It's incredibly diverse. Shows they'll exploit almost anything if it provides an entry point.
Exactly. And many of these CVEs directly enable those main attack vectors. The VPN flaws allow remote access abuse, the web app flaws provide initial access, and so on.
The specific flaws are the tools they use to carry out the broader strategies.
Precisely. Understanding that link is key for defense.
Okay, so we've seen the specific CVEs. Let's zoom out again. What are the types of vulnerabilities that keep popping up? And what are the root causes?
Good question. Looking at the categories, remote code execution, RCE, is always top-tier dangerous, obviously. Allows arbitrary code execution.
Run whatever they want.
Right. Injection flaws, SQL injection, command injection, still huge, often due to bad input validation. Command injection was actually the top KEV type in one 2024 analysis.
Still happening after all these years. What else? Authentication authorization bypass.
Very common. Skipping security checks, getting excessive privileges, privilege escalation too, getting higher access once you're already in, both prominent in KEV lists.
Path traversal.
Yeah.
Accessing files you shouldn't.
Yep. Significant in KV 2024. Deserialization vulnerabilities, exploiting unsafe data handling, also prominent. Security feature bypasses, classic memory corruption flaws like use after free and buffer overflows.
And even basic stuff like hard-coded credentials still showing up.
Still showing up. It points to some recurring fundamental problems.
Okay, so what are those underlying problems? Why do these keep happening?
Well, number one is probably lack of patch prioritization and speed. Systems just aren't getting patched fast enough, or they're not patching the right things, the ones being actively exploited.
Directly enabling the attacker.
Directly. Then there are misconfigurations, insecure defaults, cloud setup errors, badly configured firewalls, easy pickings.
Leaving the door unlocked, basically.
Pretty much. And we keep coming back to weak identity and access management, IAM, all the credential compromise. It stems from weak passwords, lack of strong MFA, too many permissions, poor monitoring.
A core security function that's still not universally solid.
Exactly. It directly enables credential theft and abuse. Then there's insecure software development practices.
Secure by design still isn't the default.
Not consistently. Leads to those injection flaws, path traversals, deserialization errors because security wasn't baked in. Inadequate input validation is a classic example. Affects commercial software, OT systems, everything.
And we can't forget the human factor, still susceptible to social engineering.
Absolutely. Insufficient training on current threats leaves people vulnerable. Directly enables phishing, all of it.
And finally, just a general lack of transparency and visibility. Hard to protect what you can't see.
That's a big one. Complex IT environments, edge devices, cloud, virtualization, the supply chain. It's hard to get a complete picture. Hinders detection, risk assessment, everything.
Okay, that gives us a really solid overview of the global threats and underlying issues. Now let's bring it closer to home, specifically Germany, and look at the BSI's perspective. Their 2024 report adds a national context, right?
It does. It's important to see how these global trends play out locally and what the national authority assesses. The BSI's report confirms the high threat level for Germany. They called it angespannt und besorgniserregend.
Tense and concerning. Matches the global picture.
Yeah. They noted something like 309,000 new malware variants per day, a 25% increase.
Per day, wow.
And they really highlighted the increasing professionalization of cybercrime specialized ransomware operators, affiliates, initial access brokers, a whole ecosystem.
A mature criminal industry.
And significantly, the BSI pointed to geopolitical tensions, especially the war in Ukraine, as a Wendepunkt, a turning point for IT security, leading to more state-sponsored attacks, espionage, sabotage.
Makes sense. So what did the BSI identify as the main threats in Germany? Ransomware is still high on the list.
Very high. A major threat, massively targeting SMEs, the Mittelstand, and municipal administrations.
Small organizations and local government.
Yes. They mentioned that attack on the municipal IT provider in South Westphalia in late 2023 as an example of the wide-ranging consequences. Tactics include encryption and data leak threats now.
Double extortion. What else did they highlight?
Continuous exploitation of vulnerabilities, obviously, both known flaws and 0 days. An increase in DDoS attacks, often linked to hacktivism around geopolitical conflict.
Disruptive attack.
Exactly. And targeted cyber espionage and sabotage by state actors, often getting in via simple perimeter compromises, plus general data theft beyond just ransomware.
So a very active landscape, but with maybe a particular vulnerability for SMEs in the public sector in Germany regarding ransomware.
That seems to be the BSI's emphasis, yeah. Could be resource constraints, maybe lower cybersecurity maturity compared to big enterprises, various factors.
But it wasn't all doom and gloom in the BSI report, was it? They saw positive signs too.
They did. They noted increasing resilience and greater investment in cybersecurity by companies and authorities.
So defenses are improving.
Leading to more attacks being prevented or their impact limited, yes. They highlighted successes like Germany's part in international takedowns, like the endgame operation against criminal infrastructure,
Okay.
and measurable improvements in security management among critical infrastructure operators.
So critic sectors are getting better.
Seems so. They stressed the value of established information security management systems, ISMS, and keeping them updated, considering new risks like AI.
And employee awareness training.
Crucial, they emphasize that too. Plus regulatory efforts like the EU's NIS2 directive pushing for higher standards across industries.
So the BSI sees high threats, evolving tactics, but also visible progress in defense and prevention. A complex picture.
Exactly. High threats, but also progress. It underscores the need for continuous effort, really. You can't stand still.
Okay, so bringing this all together, wrapping up our deep dive.
Yeah.
What are the absolute key takeaways for our listener navigating 2025?
All right, let's summarize. 1, social engineering is still king for initial access. Humans remain a key target.
Got it.
2, identity security is paramount. With credential theft so rampant, locking down accounts, strong MFA, it's critical.
Okay. 3.
3, vulnerabilities in perimeter devices and web applications are hot targets. Keep those patched, especially the known exploited ones.
Right. 4.
4, cybercrime is industrialized now. It's efficient, specialized. Expect sophisticated attacks.
Oh, yeah. 5.
5, supply chain risk is real and growing. Know your vendors, manage that third-party risk.
And finally.
And finally, 6, ransomware isn't going away. Tactics are shifting more to data theft and extortion, and smaller entities are definitely in the crosshairs.
Okay, that's a clear summary. So as a final thought for everyone listening to Mull Over,
Yeah.
given this increasing sophistication, the focus on both human psychology and software flaws, what fundamental shifts do we need beyond just, patching faster and basic awareness training?
Interesting question.
Should the focus maybe shift more towards proactive threat hunting? Or maybe fundamentally different ways of doing authentication? Where's the next big leap in defense needed?
That's definitely something to think about. Where do we invest for the biggest impact going forward?
Exactly. Food for thought as we all try to stay secure out there. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.